chug, 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 chug,
Hello and welcome back to the Wizard Staff. I'm your host, Guy.
And I'm Blake.
And we are two drunk novices who like to talk about EDH. We drink and swear, so you've been warned. Please drink responsibly when talking about children's card games. Already slipping up a little bit. Got a new wine. Yeah. We got a pretty long episode for you guys today. We're doing a kind of a encampment and just summarization of the things that have happened in the last couple months. All EDH related. Trying to minimize the number of set review episodes we're doing. Dominaria United just released, so we'll be talking about that a little bit towards the end of the podcast, but we got a couple other things to go over. But most importantly, of course, what are we drinking tonight, Blake?
Alright, well, I am usually trying to taste newer beers that are from throughout close to where I live, because here in the Pacific Northwest there are quite a few breweries. So this one is called Triple Sickle, and it's a triple IPA, and it's got an illustration of an orange creamsicle popsicle, but instead of one wooden stick, it's got three to show the tripleness. So I'm like, oh, that kind of is cute, and it's still a little bit warm, and so I'm like, oh, it feels like summer-ish, so I'll try it. It's like I said, it's a triple India Pale Ale. It kind of is trying to taste like a creamsicle. I taste it a little bit.
Okay, that kind of reminds me of those root beer beers a little bit.
Overall, it's okay. It's not the very best, but I'm going to enjoy this. I'm going to enjoy drinking this throughout the episode.
Alright, yeah. Perfect time.
How about
it's
yourself?
The summer. So I got a new wine. It's called Sheep Thrills. Meant to be a play on Cheap Thrills, because the bottle was not that expensive. But it did have a cute illustration of some sheep in parachutes, which I thought was pretty cool.
Are we both just suckers for cool illustrations on our cans of alcohol?
Well, before I tried to buy the Sheep Thrills one, I was looking for a bottle of Prophecy, which is a wine that I have drinking on the podcast before, and I do tend to like that one for taste and because the illustrations on the bottle are very beautiful. So yes, I am a sucker for a nice illustration on a bottle of wine or beer. But Sheep Thrills, so it's cute. I'm like, you know what, try something new. I feel like I'm the most repetitive on the podcast, so gotta mix things up sometimes. I would say it's fine. It definitely feels a little watered down, though that might also be because since it's so hot out, I tried to make it into a slushy with a bunch of shredded ice.
Alright.
So I don't think I would do that again necessarily, but I'm almost through my first glass. Maybe we'll pause in the middle so I can fill it up again and try it just cool, no extra ice, and I'll have a different opinion. But yeah. Alright, now you're probably wondering what is this episode, because we haven't done something like this before, and you've probably noticed by now we've done a lot of set reviews this year already, 8 total so far. And with the growing number of cards that are being designed for Commander, it gets really hard to properly look over every commander and every card for the 99. That's kind of why we did the unnoteworthy commander section. But even then, I feel like, a new set could have anywhere between 40 to 60 new commanders. Half of them we don't even want to talk about, so we just kind of glaze over those real quickly. And then the rest of them, we only can give 2 to 3 minutes best of here's what we think they could do, and then a lot of them, we never end up seeing play anyway, so it's kind of time well spent. So it's just getting boring.
I've listened to, so for example, Like, there's the newest set, Dominaria United. I've listened to one podcast that spent like 3.5 hours to just review all the legendary cards. And then I know, like, another example is the Command Zone podcast, probably the most popular, well-known Commander channel out there. They're breaking their Dominaria United set review into like 6 parts because they do a very thorough job and try to cover all bases and talk about all the relevant cards for this format. And apparently these days, like, that requires like 6-hour-ish episodes, and it's like, that's great, especially if like that's like your main job and that's your main like source of revenue. Like, that's awesome, like the Command Zone podcast, but that is not Guy and I. Our time is very valuable, and like, as much as we love Commander, I don't want to spend like 4 to 6 hours reviewing a single set, especially since they're coming out so frequently, you know?
Yeah, I'm totally with you, Blake. I mean, that's why we're doing this. And even then, like, the people who can spend more time on doing every single commander, like, if you want to go listen to those podcasts to get like deck ideas, I highly encourage you doing that. But we're going to be focusing on the cards that we think will, you know, have a long-standing impact in EDH. Like, I think in total, between the legendary creatures we have and the 99 cards, it's less than 20. So, you know, that's definitely not nearly as much, because, spoiler, I think there's like 76 legendary creatures in Dominaria United. And so, yeah, the Command Zone's going over all of those. There's some other podcasts that are going over every single card. So if you do need like a in-depth deck review for those, go listen to those. But we're just going to be talking about some of the more interesting ones and going from there. But that's not the only thing that we're going to be doing in this episode, because, you know, a lot happens in Commander, and sometimes it's really hard to kind of do, you know, keep up with all the products. So what might we talk about in a quarterly update, you might ask? Like today. So we might talk about some notable new cards that were printed for Commander, either in the premier sets, you know, the ones meant for standard, or supplemental sets. Bring up any notable reprints from those premier supplemental sets, or even secret layers. News regarding Magic, new sets that are either coming out or were announced. Maybe if we saw an interesting article we want to bring up. Discussions taking place on Twitter, because Twitter is very active. And we will wrap each episode with the quarterly updates from the Rules Committee. Were there any rules changes, bans or unbans, etc. And so that's how we'll be ending the episode. And other things that we may talk about, depending on their relevance, but we could give some thoughts on some certain mechanics, spoiler alert, stickers, or maybe some other one-off topics that we would maybe not want to do a whole episode on. But this is the first one, and we're just kind of freeballing it. We'll see how this goes, and, you know, maybe make some improvements for quarter 4. So, where did we leave off? We had 3 episodes back-to-back with Boulder's Gate, with the monocolored commanders, multicolored commanders, and the 99 cards. That was our last full set review. You know, good thing to end on a commander set.
Right.
And then we had 2 other episodes. We did an episode about treasures. And then our most recent episode was our recap of San Diego Comic-Con and Command Fest Bellevue. And now we're up to speed. So what's happened in the last 3 months? Blake, why don't you start us off with the first big thing?
Alright, so we're starting off with Double Masters 2022. This was a follow-up to the last Master set we got, like, obviously also called Double Masters, which was released like 2 years prior in 2020. And Double Masters 2022 had some really awesome reprints. Like, that is the main thing I think about when I think of Masters 2022. So there's a list, and I'm going to just read them through, because there's a lot. Like, there's Kozilek Butcher of Truth, which got really expensive over the last, like, couple months or so. Ulamog the Infinite Gyre, Divine Visitation, Emil the Blessed. It's the first time it was ever in foil. A reprinting of Smothering Tithe, whether you love it or hate it, It got reprinted, and I think it had some new arts. Then there was Teferi's Protection, which also needed a reprint, getting very expensive. There's Weather Wayfarer. There's Consecrated Sphinx. Force of Negation, also getting expensive. Mana Drain, also getting expensive. Damnation. Damnation's been printed a whole bunch of times, but it still like remains like relatively like up there in terms of price. And then, oh god, like the big three, I guess I'll say them now. So the biggest one was Imperial Seal, notably like at least a $700-ish card prior to this reprint, because it was only printed in, Guy, correct me if I'm wrong, but it was originally printed in Portal 3 Kingdoms, which is a very old set, and had a very small print run. And then it was reprinted as a Judge promo, again, very limited print run. And so, like, Imperial Seal was just, like, so expensive, like, the lowest, like, price it was, like, was about, like, $700 for the longest time. And so now, I think this reprint, like, is much more affordable. It's between $100 and $200 last time I checked for a non-foil. So that is amazing.
Yeah, that is exactly you're right. Exactly you're right. This card has seen very, very little reprints, so it's great that they're reprinting it into a set like this. And I even hope that, you know, this first reprint introduction, you know, a lot of people are going to want to be buying the set for this card, but this does open the opportunity for them to reprint it again in the future.
Yeah, so continuing, that one of the other major reprints of this set was Dockside Extortionist. Dockside Extortionist was originally printed in a Commander set, I believe. You know, Commander Precon.
Commander Precon, yep.
Yeah, and so like this one Commander Precon just flew off the shelves and was really hard to get. And then here it's reprinted a number of times. There's been a little bit of contention as to whether this is a meaningful reprint, because the price on this card is still so high because Dockside Extortionist is just such a good card. But I'm not going to get into that rabbit hole right now. Point is, Dockside Extortionist has been reprinted. And then I'd argue the third major big reprint was Warrior's Oath. So it's one of those red spells that gives you an extra turn, and then you die at the end of that extra turn. Similar to Imperial Seal, it was printed in one of those like incredibly small print runs, and this is the first time it's ever been like printed in foil. So those are the big ones. But then you got other great shit like Bloom Tender and freaking Food Chain. You got Concordant Crossroads, which need a reprint too. There's Oracle of Moldiah, great. Allosaurus Shepherd, first time in foil, great. Aminatu, Animar, Assassin's Trophy, Aurelia the War Leader, Dragonlord Dramoka, Dragonlord Silumgar, Mizzix, Muldrotha, Renin 6, Crucible of Worlds, Mana Vault, Phyrexian Altar, Panharmonicon, Sensei's Divining Top, Vidalcan Ori, Cavern of Souls, and City of Brass. Wow. That's just really good cards to choose to reprint. I think we can both agree.
Oh, totally. I was ecstatic to see a lot of these cards get reprinted, especially because if I want to pick up some of these again, I know I've spent money on a few of these already, but it's just nice to have extra copies sometimes. So bringing down the price overall is awesome. I've still been kind of waiting to buy a few of these because I was like, how low can some of these go? Like Warrior's Oath, you know, again, reprinted for, I think, the first time ever. Like it didn't even have a Judge promo, but its first time non-foil reprint is now less than $10, which is just awesome. And
the Portal 3 Kingdoms is around $400 in comparison.
Yeah, I love some of these, and some of them getting like first time in foil as well. Like I picked up an Allosaurus Shepherd. I think a meal would be cool to pick up, but yes, this is exactly what I want to see in one of these like reprint sets. So I think getting something like this every if we could, every year, like, you know, people are buying this set and making a ton of money, and they're going to make a ton of money off of it. Why not just do this every year? I don't know. I think the one kind of like set of cards that they were hoping to be reprinted in here that they didn't was the Ally fetch lands. So those were missing, but like when you look at the list, it's just like they gave us plenty, so it's kind of like, they could have done that, but like whatever. Like there's so many other good cards to like get hyped about, which is pretty cool.
Yep, overall, like, it just made some Commander cards that I've been looking to buy for a number of years. They've gone down a couple of bucks, or like more than a couple in the month or two that the set was out. So I'm like, alright, I'm gonna snag like all these up then. And so that's what I do when these reprint sets come out.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Do we want to move on to the next major thing that happened this year?
Yep. Already moving on to Unfinity, which got a small tease. We've seen a couple of the cards released for this. And so this was at Mark Rosewater's Blogatog Live in San Diego Comic-Con. And the thing about Unfinity, if you don't already know, but this is an unset, but it's set in black border. Now, what that means, because traditionally they've been in silver border, is that some cards are still going to have that like wacky unfeeling, and they are now trying to show that if it's a wacky, not legal card in Vintage, Legacy, or Commander, the holo sticker down at the bottom will have an acorn. That'll be true for all those cards, and I think, from what I've heard, I'm not 100% sure, but I think it's about half and half of like cards that are going to be legal in Eternal formats and not legal in Eternal formats. And so with that, of course, we do get some legendary creatures. So 2 so far that have been revealed are going to be actual Commander viable, as in these cards can have decks be made around them because they don't have the acorn sticker. So for example, Magar of the Magic Strings, which is 1 black-red, legendary creature, Minotaur Performer, that's a new creature type. 1 black-red, note the name of target instant or sorcery card in your graveyard and put it into the battlefield face down. It's a 3/3 creature with whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, you may create a copy of the card with a noted name. You may cast the copy without paying its mana cost, and if this creature would leave the battlefield, exile it instead of putting it anywhere else. Seems pretty strong. Like, I don't know. Put a Peer into the Abyss down as creature, attack, cast Peer into the Abyss for free. Sounds pretty good to me. Yeah. And then we also had the Space Family, Goblinson. 2 red-green, legendary creature, Goblin Guest. The Space Family has trample as long as you've rolled 3 more dice this turn. Whenever you roll a die, put a +1/+1 counter on the Space Family Goblinson. So, as you can see, these 2 cards are, they care about some wacky things, but at least they're not, like, broken, I guess. And I think they still fit into the spirit of Infinity. So I'm excited to see, personally, more of these commanders and like what they'll bring to the Commander format. Because I know a lot of people have like asked if we can make a lot of the uncommanders legal at least. But
right.
Yeah, so I feel like that's kind of like why WotC is trying to do this.
Right, and I know that there was a while ago, and by a while ago I mean like a number of years, the rules committee allowed for silver border cards to be legal for I think a month or so. And it's always kind of been a thing of some players, some Commander players have asked if silver border cards could be Commander legal. And so it's generally not been, so people do Rule 0 conversations, and some people have a mix of success or failure with that conversation. So it is interesting to now see Wizards of the Coast essentially getting rid of silver border cards and instead making them black border and creating acorn holofoils at the very bottom. There's been a decent amount of discussion it's a contentious topic. I'll just say that. I try to be an easygoing guy. I don't really care for this change. Maybe it's just me, like, used to having silver border versus black border. I know WotC is trying to expand the tonal range of their cards, especially now that Commander, which is generally speaking a more casual format than, say, Modern or Pioneer or Legacy, like more of these tournament competitive formats, but with a very serious mindset. Commander is much more relaxed, and hey, you're just chilling out with your friends, generally speaking. So WotC is trying to expand their tonal range to meet that player base, and this is one of their methods to do so, and it's definitely a path. I'm not sure I'm really in favor of it, though.
Yeah, it'll definitely be interesting to see the response from the whole set. We've only gotten a tease so far, and then you know, similar, but like maybe people do like the cards, but maybe some of them don't have an impact on Commander, and so, you know, they're just generally forgotten, and, you know, WotC's just like, alright, players don't actually like playing with these cards, so we'll go back to silver border. But the main thing, I guess, that we should talk about from Unfinity is stickers.
I think we're avoiding to talk about, yeah.
Yeah, so what is stickers? So this is a new mechanic that was introduced at the Blogatog. We don't know all the rules yet around it. We kind of have a general understanding, but the way that it works is you have, I believe at the beginning of a game, you get 10 sticker sheets, and you can only use 3 of them. And so I believe there's 32 different sticker sheet variations, all which come with stickers for names, images, and then keyword abilities and power and toughnesses. So the way that you can put stickers, like actual physical stickers, onto the cards of your Magic the Gathering cards is by getting tickets from other cards. I think one of the best comparisons that I've seen is people say it's a lot like energy, where you can store up a bunch of energy counters. You don't necessarily have to use them right away. And then you can pay with your stickers at some point when you're told to do so, to then take a certain type of sticker and put it onto your card. So stickers can either alter the name of your card, grant it a keyword or ability, power, toughness, and add art to it. I know that Morrow mentioned that there is a Hat Matters theme, so there's some hat stickers that you can put onto cards, and that's gonna, you know, matter to those cards. That does sound more like an thing, though, so we'll see if that ever actually plays out. But the main thing to talk about is, like, you know, the stickers that are going to make a difference, like changing the name of a card, because that could have implications of, you know, if you're trying to copy a legendary creature, you can change the name of the creature and then have a second one of them come out, and now it's like, oh, but they don't have the same name, so I don't have to sacrifice this new one. But yeah, it's been a very contentious topic. Morrow has said that most sticker cards were designed very carefully as to not break any eternal formats, as that means Commander, Legacy, and Vintage. But a majority of the sticker cards that were designed are also black border and do not have the acorn sticker. So it's a lot to take in.
It is a lot. This is also, I think, equally or even more like contentious of a thing to have happened, because it's, you know, it's a very silver border-esque feeling. It is a physically dexterous thing that is, it goes beyond, like, oh, putting a 6-sided die, like, to keep track of counters on your cards. It's, like, literally a sticker, and it's been described as a, like, similar to a postage stamp, that it's allegedly a material that will able to stick to cards, but then allegedly able to peel off with relative ease. And I think that's the stressor that some people have. Commander players, some of us invest a lot of money into our cards, so we will double sleeve them to protect them from just the elements, people spilling their drinks on the table. And I know that some players, such as myself, are a little bit concerned about having these stickers placed on them, and then the stickers struggling to come off potentially, or even if maybe that's not even the issue, is just having things placed on your, a sticker placed on your cards. Some people are just don't want their cards touched, for myself, for example, especially during the peak of the pandemic, if I did go out, I didn't really want people to play steal effects or control magic effects where they actually take my physical card. I talked a little bit about Command Fest Bellevue and some of the things like Opposition Agent and Gilded Drake, and how that made me a little bit nervous. And so just having people physically touch my cards, it just kind of stresses me out. And I'm I'll give you an infinite token to make a token if you don't have it, or I'll keep my command, my actual physical card. I'll give you an infinite token, a drawing of my commander. Okay, you Gilded Drake it, you take this little drawing I now just made, but don't actually mess with my real expensive cards, please.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's a concern for you, Guy, but I know a lot of people feel similarly.
I know it's a concern, or it would be a concern for me in general with I do altars on my cards, and I don't want people to mess with that so much because sometimes the paint is very sensitive. I'm not 100% certain, so I can't say this again with certainty. I just repeated what I said pretty much, but
we drink on this podcast.
Yeah, I'd have to double check, but I think stickers were designed to only mess with your own cards. I don't think people can sticker other people's cards. So I think they did have that in mind when, if, let's say they don't want to have other people touch their cards, is pretty much what I'm getting at.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have a source for that offhand. I feel like I've just, in the conversations and maybe with the answers on Blogatog, I saw that somewhere. But I guess we'll just have to see once Unfinity comes out if there is any actual stickers being put onto other people's cards. But I do think, from something I've read, that should not be the case, which I think would be good.
Okay, that makes me feel a little bit better, but only time will tell. These cards haven't actually come out yet, so only time will tell.
Yeah, I mean, just imagine we're talking about this. We have some concerns and just the implications of what it could have on the future. I think we only saw one or two actual cards that talked about the sticker mechanic, and yeah, we're already going over so much with just kind of what it is. I'm personally kind of glad that we got this tease, because I can't imagine yeah, but processing the idea of stickers at the same time of being shown sticker cards. That would seem very overwhelming to me. So I'm glad that we're getting this tease and we can talk about it now to kind of prep, because this will be something that we go over in Q4 most likely, because Unfinity releases in October. It's September now, so we should probably be getting, I would think we would be getting previews towards the end of the month, but we'll see. I know that the Unfinity was delayed originally due to stickers, actually, because the factory that made the glue for the stickers went out of business due to the pandemic, so they weren't able to get the product out in time.
Right.
So, yeah. So if you were ever wondering, oh, why was Unfinity delayed? Well, that's a fun fact for you as well. But, yeah, I think that's enough to talk about stickers, because, we could do a lot more speculating, but we're just going to have to wait and see, like, what comes of this. I think we're both very cautious, I would say, on the mechanic, but it is certainly interesting, to say the least.
Yep, time will tell. Alright, but we got more things to talk about.
Yeah, we do.
Alright, next up we were told about the Fortnite skinned cards. So, these are a secret layer, I believe?
Yes.
And it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 cards. And they are cards that are Magic cards that have been given Fortnite arts and Fortnite names. So, for example, Smuggler's Copter is in the title, but it's very small, and then like the main name you see is Battle Bus. Or Triumph of the Hordes is called Battle Royale. And there's Dance of Mini, Ethereum Sculptor, Planar Bridge, Wrath of God, and Grim Tutor. So, this is a secret layer that came out. It's very reminiscent of the Ikoria set, specifically the Godzilla cards, where you sort of had magic cards that are reskinned to have different names. Like, there's 2 names, like, basically in the top of the card. One of them is, like, the other property, the other IP, and one is the actual magic card. So, I know when that first came out, it was a little contentious, and I think the community, is still split on it, but it's more or less the thing that's here, and the game is still alive and moving forward, needless to say. So, Fortnite is a pretty popular IP currently. I have never played it, actually.
Oh, I was going to ask if you had ever played it, and if any of these, like, made sense to you.
I've never played Fortnite. I do not plan to. It's not really my thing. So I'm just going to keep going about my life. And anyone who is enjoying these, who plays Fortnite, you do you. I will say, if I'm playing a Commander game and you tutor using Crack the Vault, Grim Tutor, I gotta be honest, it's gonna take me out of the mood, and I'm gonna be like, what? I thought I was playing Magic here, not playing Fortnite. Again, that's just me, though, but I know a lot of other people feel that way. It's a little bit contentious when this was coming out, and I think because of this specific secret layer, that WotC was like, oh yeah, because this made us so much money, we're gonna keep doing secret layers, we're gonna keep trying to do as many crossover IPs to bring in audiences from other properties to expand our player base. And that sounds great and all, but it's also just like, is it worth the cost? I'm not sure. And it's the ongoing question that's going to be asked for a long time going forward, and has been asked since the beginning of this whole thing.
Yeah, I definitely see that. Personally, as someone who does alters and makes Magic cards look different, I see making the IPs come in I don't see it too much different from what I do, and I personally more have a beef with it, as in you're taking away opportunities for alterists to maybe make Smuggler's Copter look like the Battle Bus or something like that. That's actually where my personal beef comes from with this. I do like how this one at least isn't new cards, whereas with The Walking Dead and the Stranger Things one, they introduced new cards, and
that's true.
They did at least for they did at least for Stranger Things release those cards with the Magic IP. They haven't done that yet for The Walking Dead, but I believe they have plans to do that for The Walking Dead eventually.
Yeah.
I do like how these are just reskinned cards. Nothing crazy. I do like, again, Grim Tutor getting reprinted. That's pretty big. And, someone who is into Fortnite gets into Magic. I'd say this is a pretty solid start of cards to have. You got a Strong Tutor, you got a Wrath of God, which is pretty much a white staple. Battle Bus is good. And I've played Fortnite, and I do feel like, you know what, these do feel pretty thematically accurate.
Oh, yeah.
So I don't play. I mean, I haven't played in a while actually, but I did used to play like a ton when it first came out. So yeah, I'm like, you know, this is cool, but you know, I'm not personally buying this because again, I'm like, if I wanted my Smuggler's Copter or Grim Tutor, I'd do it myself. Just with, you know, Thanos with the Infinity Stone, like, fine, I'll do it myself.
Except you're not evil. All right.
Blake, okay. I literally play like World Slayer with the intention of everyone having to destroy all their stuff. What do you mean I'm not evil? Like that's what I'm aiming for in the games.
Oh my lord. A quick side note. You mentioned like the Walking Dead Secret Lair. Our friend Park has a Winota deck, and he refuses to buy Rick, which is a very strong card in that deck, because he's like, no, it takes me out of the game, like, completely. Like, I just will not play. I realize the deck is suboptimal for not playing Rick. I don't care until WotC finally prints a Magic IP version of Rick. And I'm like, yep. Alright, that's the quick story I had.
No, that is a good point. I mean, it isn't for everyone, and I can recognize that, but, you know...
to each their own. I'm personally at the point where it's like, if this IP from another property inspires you to get into Magic, hey, that's great, that's wonderful. I'm not going to buy these cards. Like, I may be a little meh on them, but it's not like if you play them against me, I'm going to get mad or angry at you and refuse to play against you. That's very childish, and I'll be like, alright, like, yeah, I'll still be like, alright, the game is a little less fun, but I'll still play, probably, most likely.
Yeah, and I think that's the right attitude to have. Though, we'll bring it up here in 2 more topics, because we will be expecting more and more of these IP crossovers, I think, moving forward. But
sure.
Anyway, so, okay. That's enough about Fortnite. We're just... Next topic, just to bring this up real quick. They do this every other year, I think. It's called the Game Night. Not to be confused with Game Nights, the popular series by the Command Zone. But the Game Night is a large pack of cards that you can get. It's like 5 half decks of Magic cards, and I think traditionally each deck has 1 brand new card for each deck, and so they did this like 2 or 3 years ago. They're doing it again. This year, all the new cards that are being released are legendary creatures, which is just relevant to bring up because, you know, you could see these as commanders, even though they weren't going to be released in their own set. So, I know, I forget which one it is specifically. It's a red creature that does double damage that was released in the last Game Night. And I want the card, but it's a little more expensive than I would care to pay for. But because it was only printed in the Game Night thing, that's what's made it hard. So I could see these getting pricey. So if you want them, maybe just buy the Game Night thing, or I don't know, pick up sealed. But we got 1 for each color. I'm not going to read word for word what each one does, but I'll just kind of give you a summary. The white one is about equipment and equip creatures, make your creatures indestructible. The blue one is about goading.
Fiendish Duo, is that the card you're thinking of?
Oh, yeah. For the red card, yes.
Mm-hmm.
But the blue card, blue legendary creature, is about goading. The black one is about creatures dying during your turn, and then you put +1/+1 counters on it. and then you draw a card once it dies for each +1/+1 counter on it. The red one probably is going to be the most relevant because it makes your dragon spells cost 1 less to cast. Whenever it attacks, if you control 3 or more dragons until end of turn, it becomes a dragon with base power and toughness 5/5. And then the green one, whenever it attacks, it gets +X/+X until end of turn, where X is the number of other elves you control. So that's also pretty relevant, as green elves are popular creature type. But I feel like all of these are pretty meh. You know, again, maybe the best one being the red one. I'm glad that none of them are like overly broken, and that's just gonna make like them super desirable. Again, kind of going back to like the Walking Dead Secret Lair, where like that was the only place that you could get those cards for a while.
Yep.
All of these were, I think, designed very carefully. Maybe we'll see 1 or 2. Very mid, just wanted to bring it up real quick.
I'm going to be honest, I had seen pictures of these cards online just from one of my sources of various MTG content, and I'm just like, where does this even come from? Like, it's only really until we started doing these notes that I'm like, oh, these cards that I've been seeing like here and there, oh, they're from a game night product. Okay. So like, compared to like the main sets, which are, there's a whole spoiler season for, and there's the actual release, and there's tons of marketing around it. Like all those cards that can be your commander in those like premium sets, there's lots of advertising for, you know what they are to like most of the player base. Like for like an invested like player such as myself, I was like wait, okay, so that's where they're, so they're real, okay. Like, I almost didn't realize that these cards existed. Yeah, and the game night hasn't even come out yet. I just thought about mentioning it here because we're already going to have so much to talk about in Q4 that I was like, I'm not going to want to talk about game night in that episode. Like, it's just going to be so irrelevant. Like, again, none of these cards are, like, overly powerful, which is great because, again, that doesn't make them too desirable, but yeah. So, but I could totally see, you know, we're so into like sets and their, I don't know, like big spoiler season and last for like a while, and it's just like, oh, here's 5 brand new cards that are just going to be a part of this one other product. Oh, okay. Like, you could totally like blink and miss it. All right, this next thing I'm pretty excited about.
Oh my god. Yeah, this is a big one.
All right, so Wizards of the Coast, I think it's an annual thing now where they say what major sets and things that they're doing the following year are going to be. And so they kind of give a schedule of everything. So they let us know, and so it's like, oh boy, what do we got coming? So we got Dominaria United coming out, and we're going to talk about that in a few minutes. Then we're going to have the Brothers' War at the end of this year, which is kind of about like the like Urza versus Mishra and the early history of those two brothers on that plane fighting. And then next up we got Phyrexia All Will Be One, which is continuing the lore where Phyrexians are invading the multiverse again, and like being pretty successful at it and being a serious threat. And then there's March of the Machines, which is continuing that. Then there's March of the Machines, The Aftermath. And then we are going back to Eldraine, apparently, in Wilds of Eldraine. And then we're going back to Ixalan, apparently, The Lost Caverns of Ixalan. And that's what we got planned for the next year. And there's a lot of hype around it. A, because it's a really big announcement, and B, it's sort of closer to currently what we're recording, and whatever the current thing is, that's what people will talk about.
Yeah, I don't know about you, but I watched live, and seeing each set kind of get teased for the next year was super hype for me, personally. I know we had the Brothers' War, which is next. I'm very excited to return to Phyrexia. March of the Machine We don't know too much because story-wise, this could go anywhere, but it's been teased as a multiplanar set. Some of the key art for it has Ixalan, Theros, Kamigawa. Like, yeah, it's like what's happening? It's been teased that like March of the Machine is going to change Magic forever.
Oh, really?
So
I missed that part. Oh, shit.
Yeah, so it's pretty big. The Aftermath, which is a epilogue, from what I've heard, is a product we haven't seen before. It's meant to be like a mini set that follows March of the Machine. Unclear of what it's meant to be or like what'll happen, but then yeah, we have 2 sets that kind of just, get us back to Magic. Probably will, start ramping up after that for like the next story. Personally, I'm most excited for Wilds of Eldraine. I loved the first Eldraine, and this one is meant to like explore more of the, to put it bluntly, the wilds, because a lot of the first set we explored the 5 different kingdoms. So now we're going to get to see like what else is out there, and I just love the flavor of Eldraine and getting to see like all these like Grimm's fairy tales references.
Yeah, I know some people are a little bit concerned because the original Eldraine set is based on which set of metrics you use. It's arguably one of the most format-breaking sets that have ever been printed. So I know people are kind of nervous having PTSD about Oko and all that.
Oh yeah,
and other cards.
So yeah, we'll see. Maybe they learned their lesson, but I always enjoy like a set or 2 here and there that you get a lot of powerful cards. Though I'm actually thinking like we're gonna probably see that in the Brothers War next. Like I expect the Brothers War to be pretty powerful, but speculation. Obviously, I know nothing. The other thing that I guess I didn't write in the notes. Oh no, I did. They also announced that at the beginning of the year, so this would come probably between Brothers War and Phyrexia, all will be one. They're going to release Dominaria Remastered, which is kind of similar to Time Spiral Remastered, but this is a set where they are reprinting cards that all took place in Dominaria. So it could be like, I think there's like 23 sets that take place in Dominaria. So they have a large card pool to choose from. One of those that was teased is Force of Will, which is awesome to get. Oh, I wrote down 27 sets. Okay, so that's even more than what I just said. I didn't even read the notes. And then, similar to what we're getting in Q4, the Warhammer decks, we are getting Doctor Who Commander decks. So I think there's going to be 4 of them. And similar to the Warhammer thing, they'll all have like Doctor Who specific related art, Doctor Who specific related names. It's all this like... So there will be certain cards that were made for Commander in these decks that are just Doctor Who in general. I think it's a bold choice considering we haven't even seen how the Warhammer decks do, but that'll be interesting. And then the other thing that we've known about this for a while, but it's been confirmed, I believe, that probably in between spring 2023 with March of the Machine and the Aftermath, in between Wilds of Eldraine, that's when we're getting the Lord of the Rings modern legal set. So those cards will be... It's almost like a Modern Horizons 3, if you think about it. It's cards that are legal and modern. They won't be legal and standard, but they can then also be legal and standard. Not legal and standard. Legal and modern, legal and legacy, legal and vintage, and legal and commander. And that's a whole set based around Lord of the Rings. So that's a lot to talk about too.
It's going to be a lot to handle.
Oh yeah.
This is, a lot of previous things we've talked about have been contentious. This is not. I am excited about this.
Oh, you are excited about the Lord of the Rings set?
I think so, because I know some people have talked about it where it's like it's a IP that can resonate more with Magic's IP, and so it's a stretch that I'm a little bit more comfortable with, to be honest.
Yeah, I also am not like it's not the battle bus that's going to be dropping into our games, because it does feel very Magic resonant. It does remind me a lot of the AFR sets that we got. Like, even though those were like Dungeons and Dragons cards, they still felt very Magic, you know? Yeah. I thought at first, like, oh wait, is Blake like a secret Lord of the Rings fan? Like, you know, is this the IP that he wants to see being crossed over?
Yeah, I'm against like that until the one thing that I love, and then I'm a complete hypocrite. No. Not necessarily.
I mean, when they do the Naruto ones, man, I'd have such mixed feelings, because like
5 years.
What? You know, like I think my Perforos deck, like 50% of the altars are Naruto related. But then for them to just do Naruto cards, I'd be like, I did all that work for nothing, I guess. So, alright, I think that's enough to talk about with Wizards Presents. So we're going to get into probably the topic that's going to take up a majority of the rest of the episode, and that's Dominaria United. Oh boy. Alright, so we are picking up back on Dominaria. The Phyrexians have returned. Sheoldred leads her army against the Coalition and completes Ajani into the second Phyrexian Planeswalker, and he kills Jaya. Spoiler alert. Even though I already just said the spoiler before spoiler alert
after. Yeah.
So, you know, I don't know what I can do about that now. Let's look at Ajani real quick, because this is the second completed Planeswalker. So we have Ajani Sleeper Agent, 1 green, and then hybrid green-white Phyrexian, and then 1 more white mana. Legendary Planeswalker Ajani. He has the completed text, so the green-white hybrid can be paid with green, white, or 2 life. If life was paid, the Planeswalker enters with 2 fewer loyalty counters. +1, reveal the top card of your library. If it's a creature or Planeswalker card, put it into your hand, otherwise you may put it on the bottom of your library. -3, distribute 3 +1/+1 counters among up to 3 target creatures that gain vigilance until end of turn. -6, you get an emblem with whenever you cast a creature or Planeswalker spell, target opponent gets 2 poison counters. So this emblem is pretty nuts. I feel like, personally, they're kind of teasing the return of poison for when we go back to Phyrexia. This is interesting. I know a lot of people are upset that Ajani is completed, so we'll see if, you know, the completion can be reversed. But as a card, I'm like, you know, it's fine. I think it's really only going to see play in Planeswalker type decks, because you'd be able to get to that -6 pretty quickly, and then if you're just playing a bunch of Planeswalker spells, you can easily start targeting your opponents to like give them poison counters as an alternate win condition.
Yeah, so I pretty much agree with what you said. I know a lot of people, lore-wise, are pretty devastated that Ajani, a character who's pretty beloved by the fan base, is completed. It's all like seems like equal to like how people were devastated about Tameo being completed. And on one hand, it sucks to see bad things happen to good characters, but at the same time, it's also like, oh my god, like there's actual stakes to this story. Like, there's actual consequences for actions. Like, oh, there's actually a meaningful threat that's not just going to be gone in 1 or 2 sets. Like, okay, I'm actually interested. Because I can't, oh my god. Like, I want to care about MTG lore. I really do. But it's just not, it's not good enough, in my opinion, to be honest. Like, I don't really care about the threats of the multiverse. It's like, oh, Nicol Bolas, War of the Spark things are happening, and there's a full-on war, and only, like, what? Like, 2 or 3 minor characters are killed? Whoop-de-doo. Like, there's so many characters, and you're telling me, like, that's all the consequences there were? Come on.
Mm-hmm.
And, like, Gideon dying was not, like, the shocker that maybe a lot of WotC staff, like, wanted. And so, like, this plot line of the Phyrexians invading, like, now that they're completing Planeswalkers, and Planeswalkers that the fan base has, like, grown to actually love and are good people, like a Johnny and Tamio, I'm like, oh, damn, okay, I actually want to know what happens in this next set now. And if it is, like, if the Phyrexian completion process can be reversed, I'm not gonna lie, I personally am gonna be disappointed, because it's like, oh, come on, like, there's a magic fix for all of this, like, and it all was undoable, like, I'm probably just gonna be sad about that. And I know people are sad about Jaya dying, because, like, oh, like, I know some people have said, like, oh, WotC doesn't know what to do with, like, 2 hot-headed, like, fiery, like, Firemancers with Jaya and Chandra, so they're gonna go with the young hot one being Chandra and get rid of the older one. Like, I'm not gonna touch on that too much. I am gonna bring it up, but I'm not really gonna touch on that. So yeah, those are my feelings on the lore in terms of the actual, like, card playability. That emblem is amazing for Super Friends decks, and if I ever make a Super Friends deck, it'll probably be in it. Yeah, that's what I got to say.
I feel like we have very similar opinions on story, the card, and yeah, this was just the first card we talked about, and I feel like it's pretty interesting. Why don't you read this next card, Blake? Because this one, it's pretty good, and I think it's, leading up to the end of a cycle.
Yeah, so this is the new Shieldred card. For the last couple of sets, we've been seeing the Paraders in different planes. Like, we got Vorinclex and Kaldheim, and Urabrask, and Kamigawa, I believe. And now we have Shieldred here in this one. So, like, the last Praetor we're going to see sometime in the future, if the cycle continues, which it will, is Elesh Norn sometime in one of these future sets. But this is Shieldred the Apocalypse. It is 2 black. Legendary creature, Praetor, Phyrexian, 4/5, with Death Touch. And then it's pretty simple. It says, whenever you draw a card, you gain 2 life. Whenever an opponent draws a card, they lose 2 life. So, very simple card. Quick side note, this is why Guy and I do not cover leaks, because the leak for this new Shieldred card was completely fake. And this is, this is why we don't cover leaks. Because I've watched other people talk about the leaks, and like give their analysis on it, and then that leak was fake, and now, those channels or those people, I think they look really fucking stupid. They look very unprofessional. Not even gonna fucking lie. God.
I'm not gonna talk about it, but apparently today the Elesh Norn got leaked, quote unquote, but a lot of people are already trying to call out that it's fake. I don't want to talk about it too much, but if you're interested, go look for it, whatever. But I like Shieldred at least.
Yeah. No, this Shieldred card is very strong. There's a number of things to be said about this. The first one is that it kind of fits within a set of cards that go in a Nekgusar deck, where you are forcing your opponents to draw a whole bunch, and you are draining them of life or dealing a bunch of damage with every single draw trigger. And so this slots into that card strategy. I've also heard people talk about Shieldred plus certain Lich effects, where Shieldred is saying draw a card, then you gain life, and then there's a number of Lich effects that say when you gain life, instead draw cards. So it is essentially a 2-card combo between these 2 cards. And then there's a decent number of talk about Shieldred the Apocalypse as a commander on her own, just as a mono black deck. Maybe it's not as strong as a Crick Son of Yawgmoth, but it can still be reasonably strong. So overall, I think this is one of the most expensive cards of the set, and I think that's very justified given the amount of interest, both as a 99 card and as a commander card.
Yeah, I'm totally with you. I'm very curious now, because we've seen everyone but Elesh Norn. What is she gonna do? When we compare Shieldred to the other 3 we've seen, she ranks pretty strong, and it's just such a easy, clean design. it's not too complicated, I guess, or it's like, having to keep track of counters or doubling up on spells and like interactions and stuff like that. Like those are good, but Urabrask also sucked. But what I also like is that it's whenever you draw a card, which is just like one of the most common game actions that you can do. And so this card is immediately just going to have an impact once it hits the board.
Absolutely,
and it's 4 mana.
Yeah, it's very easy to cast. Like, just imagine you're in a mono black deck. A lot of mono black spells will just be like, well, lose 2 life and draw 2 cards. And then, this is like, we'll just get you back the life that you lost. Like, because a lot of mono black decks will, and some have losing life as part of the cost of whatever effect they have. And because like Shieldred here, like as you said, drawing cards is such a core game mechanic that every deck pretty much does it. It's like one of the core things to card advantage in any TCG, that you're going to be gaining that life back for that mono black strategy. And so it almost like negates it. And then not only are you like shortening up your weaknesses in a sense for your deck building, but you're also punishing your opponents who are also going to be greedily like drawing cards. Like imagine your opponent has a Consecrated Sphinx out. They're drawing 2 cards on at least 2 cards on every one of their opponents' like draw phases. So that's like 6 cards per rotation of the table plus their own. So that's 8 cards per rotation of the table on average, at least, generally speaking. And so 8 times 2, that's 16 damage. That's almost half your life total. So what if they stick their Sphinx for like 2 rotations of the table? Sure, they might be gaining card advantage and like threatening a win on an average scenario, but they're also getting incredibly low in life because Shieldred's sticking around, and unless they drew into spot removal, they might be in trouble of like just like dying. Like, I know it sort of seems dumb where it's like there's a lot of like cards in this game that like, oh, simple thing happens, gain 1 life, or simple thing happens, lose a life. Like, but because Shieldred is triggering on such a core game mechanic like drawing cards, and the fact that it's 2 life instead of just 1, like it really scales to the Commander format versus saying just 1. I think that's what really makes it like, oh, this is like a threat. And then needless to say, like this is a 4/5 death touch. People probably aren't going to want to block it. So like every rotation of the table, you're probably going to be able to safely like chip in 4 combat damage. Like generally speaking, I think. So. Oh, fuck.
I'm very pleased, to say the least. So, okay. I'm gonna read Jaya, because she's very relevant to the story, but just note that I don't think Jaya was made with Commander in mind. We're really just reading her as a tribute, a
send-off, a eulogy.
Obituary. So Jaya, Fiery Negotiator, 2 red, Legendary Planeswalker Jaya. She does have 4 abilities, which is, we don't get that too often, so that's pretty good. But +1, create a 1/1 red monk creature token with prowess. -1, exile the top 2 cards of your library. Choose one of them. You may play that card this turn. -2, when choose target creature an opponent controls. Whenever you attack this turn, Jaya deals damage equal to the number of attacking creatures to that creature. And then -8, you get an emblem with whenever you cast a red instant or sorcery spell, copy it twice. You may choose new targets for the copies. So that -8, awesome. But likelihood of you being able to get up there with her only having a +1 without any kind of like buffs, as in like you're not playing like a Planeswalker heavy strategy, very unlikely. So yeah, card's okay. We also did get a secret layer around Jaya, so if you want to pick that up, go for it. Has like a bunch of Jaya related cards, but as a card, like, very mid. But yeah, I don't have much to say.
Yeah, I agree. I don't expect to really see it in Commander. I'm okay with moving on and talking about more cards that I think are related to this set.
Yeah, I mean, we do have some notable reprints, actually for the first time in a long time. Mainly, the ones worth mentioning are Liliana of the Veil. So this is that 3-mana Liliana, where her ultimate is being able to have one opponent like separate stuff into 2 piles, and they have to choose which one to sacrifice. So I think most oftentimes people would choose like all non-lands and then lands. So then it's like, do you keep all your lands or you keep all your other cards? I know that's more relevant in other formats, but still a very nice reprint to get in a set like this. Like, I do plan to pick one up just because it is a very strong card. Would be nice to have. And then the other notable reprints are we got 6 of the 10 Pain lands. So this is those lands that enter. You can tap for colorless, or you can tap for 1 of 2 colors, and then it deals 1 damage to you. We got 6, and it has been teased that the other 4 are coming in Brothers War. So if you're like, why didn't we get the full cycle? Well, it's coming, so don't worry.
I was going to ask about that. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, so some notable reprints. Just to, again, kind of summarize, we got 76 total new commanders. We have 41 from the main set, and then we got 35 from the commander decks and booster cards. 3 of them which are planeswalkers. So we got 3 new planeswalkers that can be your commander. And so this is exactly why we're not doing a set review, because 76 commanders is a lot to talk about. And again, if we decided half of these were unnoteworthy and just set them aside to focus on the other half, we'd still have like a multi-part episode. We're just trying to condense down into the ones that we want to talk about and are relatively strong. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 new commanders that we want to talk about. And so, Blake, I'm going to read this first one.
Go for it.
Alright, so it's Soul of Windgrace. Didn't think we'd see a new Windgrace card, but here we are. So this is 1 black, red, green, legendary creature, cat avatar. When Soul of Windgrace enters the battlefield or attacks, you may put a land card from a graveyard onto the battlefield tapped under your control. In a way, this is kind of like a planeswalker, considering he has 3 different abilities. But so you can green, discard a land, gain 3 life. 1 in a red, discard a land, draw a card. 2 in a black, discard a land card. Soul of Windgrace gains indestructible until end of turn, tap it. So this is super strong, as it can just find a land from anyone's graveyard. It doesn't have to be your own. So if someone just plays a fetch land, hopefully you're able to get that back and use it for yourself. And the only one of the fetch lands that isn't going to work for you is Flooded Strand, as in that finds a plains or an island. All the others will be able to find you the colors you need. But yeah, his abilities are pretty strong, can be done at instant speed. You're probably going to have, very similar to the first Lord Windgrace we saw, pretty heavy on the land, so you can just discard, be able to attack, get a land back. Probably want to be playing like some Dredge in there. I mean, Jund cares about lands in the graveyard in general, so I think that this one's going to be, pretty popular. People like Windgrace. He was one of the more popular Windgrace commanders. He was one of the more popular commanders from the 2018 set. But yeah, I like this. It's very clear like what you want to do. You want to have a lot of lands. You want to be able to discard those lands, and then you can just get them back.
Yeah, this is pretty reasonable in terms of it's easy to cast. Like the activated abilities, I'm surprised that they don't have to tap, and you can do them at instant speed. So that's pretty strong. I still think original Lord Windgrace will probably be more popular than Soul of Windgrace, but that's just my speculation. We'll see how things actually work out.
Yeah, probably the play pattern is, let's say green, discard a land, gain 3 life. Then, just attack. You get that land back. could be a fetch land. Yeah, I'm pretty sure you're going to be want to play a lot of landfall type cards. Yeah, this one, yeah, pretty cool. Very interesting design. I know that, like, the lore behind the Soul of Windgrace is, like, even though Windgrace is dead, he is still a protector of Dominaria, so he's, like, revived as, you know, seeing the Phyrexians as a huge threat to Dominaria. He's able to, like, revive himself and, you know, help out one last time.
Alright, you ready for the next one?
Yeah, go for it.
Alright, we have Ivy, Gleeful Spell Thief. I've seen a lot of people talk about her. For only a green and a blue, you get a legendary creature fairy rogue 2/1 with flying. That says, whenever a player casts a spell that targets only a single creature other than Ivy, you may copy that spell. The copy targets Ivy. And then in parentheses it says, a copy of an aura spell becomes a token. So, this is a very small little fairy, but it's sort of a reverse Zada, where instead of targeting Zada and then it targets everything else, you can target something else and it will automatically target Ivy. So it's a design space that hasn't really been explored before, and it has the potential to be reasonably powerful. So I think due to those two factors, and the fact that she's very easy to cast, with a reasonable number of things to do within her color identity of Simic, I think I'm seeing a good amount of interest in this card. And it's also nice to see a Simic commander that does more things than play lands and draw cards.
Yeah, I think that this is probably going to be one of the more popular commanders, and I agree. Again, more interesting design. I know, like, I kind of joked with Park, but, like, you know, I could play this deck, and if, let's say, I played this against your Sigarda deck, where you're just casting a bunch of auras that target a single creature, well, I can also benefit from that really early, because she's pretty easy to cast.
Oh my gosh, that's true, isn't it? Like, if I cast Ancestral Mask... Oh, fuck.
Yeah, if you cast Ancestral Mask, and then I could cast Ancestral Mask also, and onto, like, one of my creatures, and then I would get a second copy of Ancestral Mask onto Ivy, and then just boom boom, like, keeps pumping her up. Like, this can get pretty gross pretty fast. I think the tough thing is just, like, do you always want to cast her on turn 2 if you have the mana available? Like, when's the right time to cast her? Because you want to cast her when you know a lot of people are going to be playing cards that, like, target their cards. Or, like, this even also just works with, like, some of those red cards where it's like, give it haste, draw a card. So then you get to then copy that, and you can give her haste, draw a card, stuff like that. But yeah, it really depends on, I think, when do you cast her to get the most benefits, and then, you know, being able to pump her, because you want to try and give her indestructibility as fast as you can, probably like hexproof. Yeah, like, it's tough.
Generally speaking, in most situations, it's worth it to play your commander and then do whatever you're going to do. I feel like that's more of what happens than needing to set up and then cast your commander. I mean, obviously it depends. I could be wrong, but, you know, this cast for 2, you might as well cast her and then, like, oh, what, she dies? Well, we just recast her for 4. That's reasonable. That's still earlier than a lot of other commanders in this format.
That is true. I guess, like, I'm thinking of it in the perspective of, like, playing specifically against, like, you know, a Voltron deck, where, you know, you need your commander out first before you're probably going to get a lot of the buffs. So sure. I wouldn't cast Ivy until I know you have your commander out, because then once you start targeting yours, then I can also benefit from that. So it does seem like, yeah, it would really depend on the game that you're playing, because if it's like, what if nobody else is, like, playing a Voltron style strategy? Then it's like, okay, well, then I'm gonna need to, like, get this out as soon as possible and start doing my own thing. But and I'm not just saying, like, build a deck, rely on your opponents to do all the work for you. you still want cards in your deck to be able to cast and, you know, be able to copy for Ivy. I guess you do want to make sure that, like, you have creatures on the field as well that you can start targeting to also give Ivy the benefits. You know, because, like, you'd cast a creature, then cast Ivy, so then you can, like, target a creature to then copy that. Mm-hmm. Yeah, this one, see, I like how, you know, we only have 7 more commanders to talk about, but we're really getting to, like, think pretty hard about some of these commanders and, like, their play patterns, because we have the time.
Yeah, I will say, another thing about this commander is, I feel like this is one of those commanders where you need to know the rules of Magic somewhat well. Like, just as an example, you really got to read her text, because, like, imagine someone casts Swords to Plowshares on some creature on the board, that you don't have to then copy the Swords to Plowshares to target Ivy, because it's a May ability. You don't have to cast a copy of that spell. And so there's just a lot of, like, little nuances like that, where it's like, oh, that's good that, like, his Swords to Plowshares played a lot, and other sources of spot removal, so I'm glad that it's a May ability.
Let's see, you just read Ivy, so I'm going to read this next one. And this one, I mean, I included just because I thought for a long time, like, when are we going to get this? And I guess we got it. But this is one of the commanders in the commander decks. This is Jared Carthalion. Wooburg, so white, blue, black, red, green. Legendary Planeswalker, so he does have the text, he can be your commander. +1, create a 3/3 Kavu creature token with trample, that's all colors. -3, choose up to 2 target creatures. For each of them, put a number of +1/+1 counters on it equal to the number of colors it is. And then -6, return target multicolored card from your graveyard to your hand. If that card was all colors, draw a card and create 2 treasure tokens. So this is the first Wooburg black border Planeswalker card. We did get, like, an Urza who was all colors from an unset, so that kind of counts. But this one can be your commander, and I just think it's, you know, very interesting to see. Like, we haven't gotten this before, and it does seem like this is a card that does care about wanting to play a lot of colors in your deck. It kind of benefits for those who play Wooburg, which I know is very tough because, you know, sometimes when you play Wooburg, you want to make sure you have, like, the most optimal mana base, and that's very expensive. So yeah, this one, just being able to give benefits for also, you know, trying to play cards with as many colors as you can, seems very strong. Or not, I don't know if this is going to be, like, very strong, but it's interesting. I think, yeah, these first 3 that we've talked about are very interesting. The next one we're also going to talk about is very interesting. But yeah, do you have thoughts on Jared, Blake?
I think he has interesting design space, along with, I think, maybe 1 or 2 other cards in this set where it's really incentivizing multicolor, being a 5-color deck. And I think that's pretty cool, because that's not really an archetype that's existed before. So I'm pretty stoked on that. I know there's a little bit of lore behind him, but again, like, I try not to look into the lore too much. He just seems rad. I think he's the kind of character that a lot of MTG players wish they were. You know, huge buff, has a giant sword, has amazing, beautiful hair. Like, yeah.
Yeah. I guess, like, the nice thing too is, because when I think of, like, Wooburg commanders before, and there's another one we're actually going to talk about here, but you know, like, the Ur-Dragon I know is very popular. We have Joda, but those don't necessarily, like, they're more built around, like, other archetypes, and I don't know, they don't reward you for having to already do something that's difficult, which is, like, cast spells with multiple colors, whereas Jared will benefit you for just having those types of cards in your deck. So I think that's nice. Yeah, otherwise, like, I don't have much else to say. Like, I don't think he's terribly too powerful.
Alright, so this next commander we have is Hazazon, Shaper of Sand. It's the second time we've seen Hazazon. I believe the last time it was his original printing, and I think it's like a $400 card is the original printing. So, we're finally seeing a new Hazazon, Shaper of Sand. Red, green, white. Human warrior 3/3 with Desert Walk. So, this creature can't be blocked as long as the defending player controls the desert. And then you can also, you may play desert lands from your graveyard. So sort of like a Crucible of Worlds effect, but specifically for your deserts. Whenever a desert enters the battlefield under your control, create 2 1/1 red, green, and white Sand Warrior creature tokens. So I like how there's a little bit of an homage to the original Hazazon, where you make these Sand Warrior tokens. And this is a little bit different, arguably I think less powerful, but I really appreciate the flavor here. I appreciate how this is a new design space where it's essentially desert lands matter within Naya, and because of that, I'm in favor of this card.
Yeah, it's, again, like Jared, this is the first time we're getting a Desert Matters commander. I double checked, but there are 16 cards in Hazon's color identity that we could use for deserts in order to kind of like benefit from playing deserts from the lands or getting these tokens. One of the downsides, though, that I did see across all those deserts is that a lot of them do enter the battlefield tapped, like almost half of them. So I think there's a new card called Tiller Engine, which is 2 mana artifact construct. Whenever a land enters the battlefield tapped and under your control, choose 1. Untap that land. Or tap target non-land permanent and opponent controls. So I think that's a good card to include in the deck, or like, I think is it Amulet of Vigor? Is that the one?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So, yeah, that one. So that'll help, make sure you're not just like mana screwing yourself, because if you have a lot of tapped lands, then it's not going to be easy for you to cast your spells right away. You're also creating 2 tokens for each desert, which is very strong. So I think also like including cards like Perforos, Impact Tremors, what's the other one? Witty Roastmaster. Those cards, benefit from whenever a creature enters the battlefield, you're going to be able to deal damage to all your opponents at the same time. Or there's also, I know, the Naya mechanic from New Capenna was kind of like, what was it? Alliance? Where it's kind of a creature landfall. So I know that, like, being able to get 2 creatures to enter the battlefield, you're going to get a lot of those alliance triggers. So I think including some cards like that will help. But yeah, Hazon had his original printing in Legends, and I don't think we mentioned this, but they are doing a cool thing where they did find a bunch of Legends boxes in one of their old factories or old warehouses. So they opened up a bunch of packs and are including Legends cards in some of the collector boosters. Some of those can be very expensive, like Chains of Mephistopheles, Moat, the original Hazon, Angus Mackenzie, cards like that. But yeah, it'd be cool to maybe be able to get one of those, but it is nice that, people who do like the Hazon character can now have a more affordable card. They did that with, I think, 35 characters or so. Maybe it was a little less, where they did like, they're available as like box toppers and available in the collector boosters, but they're like redone versions of popular legendary creatures from before, or just ones that had really bad effects. Like I know the Pietro Ghost of Ramirez, he got a new card, and like his original version was really bad, but
yeah,
they got a new one, so yeah, that's pretty cool. That's again like an awesome thing that they're doing in this set. Really paying homage to all the cool characters that we've gotten to see.
Yeah, we're not going to talk about all of them, but we at least want to talk about this one. Yeah.
Alright, so next up we have Joda the Unifier. So Joda's back. Also Wooburg, so white, blue, black, red, green. Legendary creature, human wizard. Legendary creatures you control get +X, where X is the number of legendary creatures you control. More importantly, whenever you cast a legendary spell from your hand, exile cards from the top of your library until you exile a legendary non-land card with lesser mana value. You may cast that card without paying its mana cost. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. So that basically reads Legendary Cascade. And with the amount of legendary creatures we got, and we just got a ton of legendary enchantments from Battle for Baldur's Gate, it's going to be very easy for you to, get out Joda, and then, most of the cards you're going to be casting are legendary, and you're just going to get, 2 for 1 on all your cards, which is bonkers. I've seen some builds of this deck where, one of their primary ways of winning is, they cast Galta, who's a 12 mana legendary creature, and then they're just able to kind of get the next best thing, and then I forget exactly how they win, but it's a way of being able to recast Galta to just always guarantee whatever you're gonna hit next you're gonna be able to cast.
I like this. The original Joda, I have seen a lot of people talk about how strong that deck can be. It's usually from more casual players who don't really understand just how strong the format can be. I'm fine with the original Joda, so I think those people are going to be a little bit more receptive to this printing of Joda. And as at the time of recording, I believe this is the most popular commander from this set.
I think that's right. We did look at EDH Rec a night or two ago. But yeah, I think, the first Joda, very popular. This one, again, being centered around a theme of cards that have become more and more popular and only will become more and more popular with a format that cares about legendaries, this card is just going to be nuts.
I'm excited about it. Should we read the next one?
Yeah, go for it.
Alright, this is Joyra, Ageless Innovator. So we've had a number of Joyras throughout the year. I believe this is number 3. So, blue and red, you get a Human Artificer, 2/3. And then it says tap. Put 2 Ingenuity counters on Joyra. Then you may put an artifact card with mana value X or less from your hand onto the battlefield, where X is the number of Ingenuity counters on Joyra. So, is it artifact matters deck, more or less, and you can cheat your cost of your artifacts potentially. She's only 2 mana to cast. You can tap not just at sorcery speed, but also on the your opponent's turns, so it's not limited in that degree. This has a chance to be reasonably powerful. I'm seeing a little bit of interest around this card. Both previous versions of the other Joyra cards have a history of seeing a high amount of play in this format, so I don't see why this one wouldn't either.
Yeah, she's one of the more popular characters, and we're limiting ourselves onto what cards we can talk about, but this one does seem pretty strong, whereas she enters, you can find ways to give her haste, because red, you can find ways of proliferating those ingenuity counters so you can get up there pretty high, because what's a pretty high artifact creature that you can put into play, Blake?
Blightsteel?
That pause was a lot longer than I expected you to take, considering it's also down in the notes.
I was building the suspense.
Oh, okay. But yeah, so cheating Blightsteel and Colossus into play is kind of the dream. There's also Darksteel Forge, which would then give all your artifacts indestructible. Magic Mirror, which you're able to probably also benefit from putting counters onto this card and then also being able to proliferate that. Yeah, Bosch, Platinum Imperium, Chroma's Memorial, Chromatic Ori, all pretty good cards that you could cheat into play with her. I know the Ozolith is a good way of being able to like make sure that when she dies, you can put the ingenuity counters onto that and then recast her, get those ingenuity counters back right away. So then it's like, dude, yeah, I expect her to be one of the, not necessarily most popular, but one of the stronger commanders to come out of this set.
You know, there's a lot of pretty dumb artifacts that exist in this game.
Yep. Yep.
At the very least, play Platinum Angel and just protect it.
Oh, yeah.
That's always good. That's always fun.
Yeah, this next one, too, I think is also up there in terms of, like, probably one of the more stronger commanders that we can get. So this is Myria, Scholar of Antiquity, 1 red-green, legendary creature, Elf Artificer. Tap an untapped non-token artifact you control, add green. Where have we seen that before? Tap 2 untapped non-token artifacts you control. Exile the top card of your library. You may play it this turn. Gee whiz. A card that's going to benefit you for playing Cheerios. And then, you know, basically like, what is it? Impulse Draw. To then play more Cheerios. To then add mana. Like, yeah, this seems fine. So this is very similar to Urza. If you can't already get at my like sarcasm and just bewilderment, where you can just tap artifacts for mana that are 0 cost, that's Cheerios, and then you can then use those to get that card advantage and just play more Cheerio cards. So yeah, and then you can even turn artifact lands into color fixing. So that would be like Great Furnace, Treasure Vault, Darksteel Citadel, Power Depot. Those are the non-green artifact lands that there are. But yeah, so roughly 48 Cheerio kind of category cards, and we have Brothers War coming up, which is going to probably be an artifact heavy set, and possibly the return, well, not possible return to Phyrexia, but Phyrexia also might have an artifact heavy set theme. I think we're going to get a lot of new good artifacts coming out. And again, artifacts are just just like generally good because they can go into every deck. So I don't know. Like, this is nuts. I don't know what else to say. This one's broken. I'm just waiting to see the CDH deck around it.
Yeah, this is pretty nuts. Like, it's easy to cast at just 3 mana value. It gives you mana advantage. It gives you card advantage. Like, the fact that it does both, yeah, I'm like getting flashbacks to Urza. I'm like, why did it give both mana and card advantage? This is dumb. I do appreciate how it's sort of a Gruul deck that cares about artifacts, though. Like, that's something that isn't often seen, so in that regard, I appreciate it. It's design space that hasn't really existed to my knowledge.
Yeah, this is Gruul Artifact Matters. I know red is kind of like primary in, well, one of the colors that does care a lot about artifacts. I know like people have problems with green caring about artifacts because they're like, oh, it's so unnatural to the environment. But this one's good. Like, I think of all the commanders we've talked about so far, I think this is the one that I would possibly want to like build a deck around, because I'm just like, dude, this is nuts. Like, this card just does all the work for you, and it's 3 mana. Like, Urza's 4 mana. Like, oh my god.
This is better than Urza, confirmed. No.
Alright, let's see. We got 2 more commanders to talk about. One of them is like so-so, but let's see. I just talked about this one. Blake, read this next one.
Right, so this is Braids, Arisen Nightmare. There was the original Mono Black Braids, which was banned and is still banned to this day. Then there was the Mono Blue Braids, that was sort of a group hug style deck, generally speaking. And now we have a Braids Risen Nightmare, returning back to being a Mono Black deck. This is 1 black. It's a Nightmare legendary creature, 3/3, that says at the beginning of your end step, you may sacrifice an artifact, creature, enchantment, land, or planeswalker. If you do, each opponent may sacrifice a permanent that shares a card type with it. For each opponent who doesn't, that player loses 2 life and you draw a card. So, I've talked with my friend Park about this a little bit. And this is a reasonably strong, like, card draw engine where at your end step, like, you can be drawing, like, up to 3 cards. Because if you build this as a commander, or if you put this in the 99 of the correct sort of discard deck or resource denial style deck, like, your opponents are not going to want to sacrifice their things, and you're just going to be drawing 3 cards at your end step each time, and you're going to be able to break parity and hopefully outvalue your opponents that are going to be sacrificing their shit. And so this is pretty good for like a resource denial style deck. This is not, to be clear to any newer players, this is not on the same level as the original Braids. This card is not going to be banned. That's what I'm trying to say. Like, it's on a different wavelength and would not be banned by the rules committee, for anyone who was wondering.
Yeah, this, because it's definitely a May ability. It's not like a forced ability.
Mm-hmm.
I do like how, let's say you're in a situation where, you know, you want the person who is gaining a lot of advantage off, like, let's say Smothering Tithe. But that's their only enchantment. And so if you have an enchantment, you can sack that enchantment and almost force the player who has the Smothering Tithe that you want them to, like, get rid of, to then have to really think, like, do I sacrifice this Smothering Tithe, or am I going... Maybe that's actually a bad example, because then when they draw a card, they, you know, can create treasure. But something along the lines of, like, you know, when you find the most problematic card on the table, and if you have something like that, you can then sacrifice something to kind of, like, almost force your opponents to, like, have to think, do I sacrifice this and let them draw, or do I have to sacrifice this in order to deny them that card draw? So I do like how this is very much a political card, because, like, you don't have to sacrifice anything yourself, and your opponents don't have to sacrifice anything either, but if they don't, then that's when you get the advantage.
Absolutely. That's a great clarification. And I also kind of want to touch on something that you spoke about briefly, which is the fact that if you're in a mono black deck, whether this is the commander or in the 99, this is a way for mono black to get rid of enchantments, which, aside from Feed the Swarm, there aren't very many good ways to do that. So not only could you potentially be getting rid of your opponent's enchantments potentially, you could also, there's times when you as a mono black deck would want to get rid of your own enchantments, such as Necropotence. Like, you've gotten plenty of card advantage from Necropotence, and you no longer want it on the board, and it's kind of now a hindrance. Like, thanks to Braids, like, you can now sacrifice it and then also put your opponents in a tricky situation.
Yeah, I know black is tertiary in enchantments, but this hits, like, every permanent type. Artifacts, creatures, enchantment, land, planeswalker. Like,
yes.
This just does it all. So this is, like, actually some stellar removal for black, because it's like, yeah, I'll sacrifice an artifact. Now everyone else does, or... you know, because I think that's actually what black tends to have the most problem with, is getting rid of artifacts. So, like, if you sacrifice an artifact, then everyone else has to sacrifice an artifact. And that's kind of like, you know, that's nuts. Like, yeah, this card's... I didn't originally include it on the list, but I'm glad that you're now, like, you told me to put it on, because, like, this is a good card. Like,
yeah, like, I know Park's gonna put it in one of his decks, and I'm gonna really struggle to play against it. Fuck.
Oh yeah. I mean, I don't know if I would necessarily want to include this in my decks. I mean, I don't tend to play black nearly as much, but I feel like now I just gotta pick one up, because it's like, this is good. This is good. Yeah. Alright, we are on to our last commander. This one's like so-so, but it's definitely one that has a pretty relevant ability. So this is Ellis Ilkor, Sadistic Pilgrim. It's white and a black. legendary creature, Phyrexian Core Cleric. Has Death Touch. Pretty good. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, you gain 1 life. For another creature you control dies, each opponent loses 1 life. Pretty simple. Creatures enter, you gain life. Whenever your creatures die, each opponent loses 1 life. This fits right into like a lot of those Aristocats style decks. Very similar to like Blood Artists, where you're just going to be able to drain people a bunch. Good card.
I am pretty surprised by the fact that it's not exactly Blood Artist, but it's similar to Blood Artist, where in the correct like Aristocrats like style deck, you can just like repeatedly like kill creatures and like drain your opponents to death. You know, it's not too difficult to do an infinite loop here, or even just like do it manually, non-infinite. It's not too difficult to get enough like dice triggers to just like kill everyone in Commander, even though they start at 40 life. Like, I can see this like being in a Orzhov Aristocrats deck, and whether it's the Commander or in the 99, just like really like be essentially a combo piece. It has potential.
Yeah, definitely. All right, so that was the new commanders that we thought are going to be relevant, and we'll probably see some play. Now we're going to move on to the 99 cards, and we got a decent number. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then 2 cycles, kind of. So yeah, Blake, why don't you just kind of start us off easy with these new lands that are really nice.
Sure. There's a new cycle of lands that are 2 colors, and they're basically dual lands, except they enter the battlefield tapped. That's really all it is. So, like, there's a white-blue one that's a plains and island, so you can get them with your fetches, but they enter the battlefield tapped. So, this is great because, you know, WotC's obviously recognized, like, oh, dual lands were way too strong for, like, tons of formats that they can be played in. So we're basically doing a notch below that. So this is great if you want, like, if you're a Commander player and you don't have $3,000 to just buy all of the revised duels. So I think these will still be worth some money, but they're going to be much more affordable and accessible to the average person, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I totally agree. I like how WotC is just recognizing the fact that, like, you know, really there is nothing they can do about the reserve list. So what are some new ways of designing cards where we can try and fit the bill for cards that players need? Tap dual lands. Hasn't been done before, surprisingly enough.
Yeah, it is surprising, right? It's like
we did Snowlands that had dual types before this.
Right?
So, yeah, well, these aren't necessarily the strongest, but, you know, like, let's say you fetch for this on the end of your opponent's turn, before your turn, just enters the battlefield, taps, and untaps immediately. It's just like, you know, like, if that's what you needed at that moment, or not the... If it's like you could go a turn cycle and didn't actually need to respond with something, this is a good find.
Yeah, I know throughout this podcast I have said, like, if you don't have to play lands that enter the battlefield tapped, don't. But this is, like, as close as you can get to me almost playing tap lands.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because otherwise, like, I'm fortunate enough to, like, have the money to, like, pay for lands that don't come into the battlefield tapped, but these are close to, like, making me play them. It's close.
I definitely think, like, picking up one of each of these, not a bad call. Not a bad call. All right. Now let's move into the other noteworthy cycle. And I think this is probably the most exciting for me, personally.
Mm-hmm.
So this is what we call the Defiler cycle. So there's one for each color. And this is a rare cycle of creatures that all have the text to some degree of, as an additional cost to cast a color, so let's say white, permanent, you may pay 2 life. This spell costs white less to cast if you paid it this way. This reduces only the amount of the white mana you pay. So essentially, with this creature out, it's saying white mana symbols are now Phyrexian. So they're all Phyrexian creatures. You got Phyrexian human, Phyrexian sphinx, Phyrexian horror, Phyrexian kavu, and Phyrexian worm. So all of these are doing kind of what Crick did in the sense of like turning black into Phyrexian symbols. And that's just crazy. So I'm glad that like the black one is the worst one because they already have Crick. They didn't need another one. Exactly. Yeah. So alright, I'll just kind of read which each one does real quick. So the white one, so in addition to like just making your white or whatever color now pay 2 life instead, they each have an additional ability for whenever you cast the corresponding color permanent spell. So white creates 1/1s, pretty good. Blue draws a card, that's very good. So black will pump a creature and give it menace, which isn't like terrible, because like Minache menace is okay in some situations, but in comparison to at least the rest of these, it's the worst. Red got good. Red ping for 1 damage to any target, so that can be opponents. I'm very excited about that one. And then green pumped the entire team, which will also include itself. So you're just going to make your green creature already like bigger and bigger whenever you're casting green permanent spells, which is fairly common.
Oh fuck, I didn't realize this pumped itself. Oh my god.
Yeah, like at first I was like, yeah, green's like okay, like yeah, it's just going to make your creatures bigger, but it's also making itself bigger, which now I'm like,
good god.
Yeah, so it's hard to rank these because I think they each play to the strength of their color. So they're all very good in their corresponding color, but it's just kind of like, so it's hard to compare them each to themselves. But it's a good cycle, and they're not rare, so they're not going to be like terribly hard to get. What do you think of these?
You know, every set has a cycle like this where it's sort of like one of the main cycles of the set. This one feels very appropriate. It's Phyrexian, which is what's happening in the lore. The black one, I am happy that is like arguably the weakest because, like you said, we already have Crick, so it's fine that that's the weakest one. Then I would argue, you may hate me, but I'm going to argue the red one is the next one in line in terms of powerful. Then I would say like maybe the blue one, because the blue one, like mono blue decks don't tend to have that many permanents, but in the right mono blue deck or blue X deck, whenever this card is played in it, it's going to be gas because it's just going to draw you straight card advantage. Then the white one, like I'm mainly thinking of like Winota decks, where it's kind of a new, I believe it's a card that's going to be played in Winota decks. And even just for mono white strategies, like it's a reasonably strong card. And then I think I would make the case that the green one is the strongest because within mono green strategies or green X decks, there's just so many like creature based strategies where like pumping up your entire board every time you cast like a green spell, which like because you're green, most of them are permanent spells, so like you're just going to be pumping up your board and it's going to be very strong. You're just going to be able to like swing out with a huge board. The downside to it is it's very reminiscent of Cathar's Crusade, where like you're going to play like, okay, you play a creature, you put counters on everything, you're going to play another creature, now everything has a different level of counters, you're going to play another creature, everything's going to have a different level of counters. So like it's incredibly hard to play in paper and do it efficiently and smoothly. Like, there are ways in which, like, you place your cards and, like, you, like, arrange your dice, and have specific dice to make it go smoothly, and hopefully, like, you don't even necessarily, like, cast all the creatures you could, but you get them just big enough to, like, alright, now they're obviously big enough, I swing in, and I win. So, from, like, actually playing out this green worm, it's gonna be kind of a pain. It's kind of going to be difficult to see when you see it across the table, because it's like, oh god, it's going to be so hard for them to actually physically play this card out. Because it's similar to Cathar's Crusade, which a lot of, you know, if you've been around as long as us, we've heard stories about people actively taking out Cathar's Crusade just because it slows down the game and it's a lot of dice management and it's a lot of hassle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is a very good point. I didn't quite think about that, but, like, it's a good card, and I think people are still going to play it just because even Cathar's Crusade-like effect, which is good, and then also being able to reduce mana costs by, you know, paying life, that's really good.
Mm-hmm.
I think I did say it's kind of hard to, like, rank them against each other, but, like,
it is hard, yeah.
Defiler, see, like, almost...
But I think generally speaking, we're kind of in agreement with, like, that spectrum. Where, like, the black's, like, generally the worst, the green's generally the best.
I mean, the thing for me is, like, I almost think the white one might be the best.
Oh, really?
Because so many white decks also have lifelink. Or, like, creatures in white have lifelink. Where, like, if you're just gaining back, like, a couple life every turn, that's just going to already, like, pay back some of that, like, Phyrexian quote-unquote mana that you just paid. So that's just going to make it a little harder. And, you know, you have... I'm, like, really tempted to run this in Avacyn. I'm just, like, struggling to think of, like, what to take out.
But you can't play this...
Because I have so many...
Avacyn, because the next card we're going to talk about, I'm pretty sure you want instead.
No, that next one also is, like, really tough. I'm struggling between those two. Okay, we'll just move on. I did read the Defiler Cycle, but I do want to read this next one, because I do like it a lot. Alright, so this is Sarah Paragon, 2 white, creature angel. It is a mythic. Flying. Once during each of your turns, you may play a land from your graveyard or cast a permanent spell with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard. If you do, it gains when this permanent is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, exile it, and you gain 2 life. So even there, you're gaining 2 life, which could be used to pay for 1 white mana pip if you had Defiler of Faith out. So, again, already kind of like paying back dividends. But for 4 mana, this is a strong card. Like, I've seen a lot of people compare it to Sun Titan.
I can kind of see why people do that,
yeah, because it is low costed cards, and Sun Titan can bring back, like, lands as well. This can come out a little earlier, and it doesn't need to attack necessarily. It's just like you do it. I think, like, the one downside to it is just, like, whereas Sun Titan, you could, like, get back a fetch land, get a land, and then you could bring back that same fetch land. Because the permanent gains when this permanent is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, exile it, and you gain 2 life, you're not going to be able to repeatedly do that with your fetch lands as you could with Sun Titan, but still very strong just to, like, you know, save on the mana cost of 2, which, you know, like, power creep, but yeah. Defiler of Faith, Sarah Paragon, and then one other card we're talking about. I'm just like, well, one of the one card we haven't talked about yet, I am putting in Avacyn for sure, but these 2 cards are just like, oh my god, like, I need to, like, just figure out, like, what is the best slot for them to, like, go into, but I haven't figured it out. It's a good card, is just what I'm trying to say.
I think this is probably one of the most expensive cards of the set currently. And I think it's pretty justified in terms of WotC trying to put out these mono white cards every set to boost up mono white. And I think, yeah, this definitely fits that category.
Yeah.
There's a lot of 0 to 3 mana value spells or even lands that, yeah, you definitely want to use more than once. Like, assuming that your card quality in your deck is pretty high. And it just supplements, like, your generally speaking, lack of card advantage in the mono white color identity, like it's definitely going to help in the fact that this is another angel that only costs 4 mana. Wasn't there another mono white angel that only costs 4, like Angels of Tyr or something? Like
Oh, Battle Angels of Tyr. That one was also pretty recent.
That was another angel that only cost 4 and had a really strong effect for mono white. And I'm like, damn, like, all right, WotC, respect. All right, I like this. This is giving me similar vibes.
Yeah, and it's just awesome because it's a way of being able to get card advantage without directly being draw, because it does extend your graveyard into being like, okay, what cards can I play from here this turn? Like, if there's a card, again, like, yeah, you want to play multiple times, like, I'm looking at some creatures right now in my deck, like, I don't know, like, if I lost majority of my creatures, actually, like, I think of the 28 creatures in my Avacyn deck, only 4 of them aren't 3 mana. Like, I could bring back any of these almost. Got some really strong ones, like Ranger Captain of Eos.
Yeah, and you can't bring back World Slayer.
I'm finding other ways to do that, but yeah. Okay. You read this next one, because this next one's also pretty good. This is the other, probably, like, bomb mythic. Well, I mean, we've got some good cards.
Oh god, it really is. I can't believe they fucking printed this card. So this is Silverback Elder, 2 green. It's a 5/7 ape shaman that says whenever you cast a creature spell, choose one of the following. And then there's 3 that you can choose from. Destroy target artifact or enchantment. Number 2, look at the top 5 cards of your library. You may put a land card from among them onto the battlefield tapped, put the rest on the bottom of your library in random order, and then number 3 says you can gain 4 life. So this is... oh god. This is a very good card for Commander. It's a 5 mana green creature that a lot of mono green and green X decks are going to want, that are specifically creature focused, because it's very similar to Aura Shards. Alright, so that's the card everyone's comparing it to. Alright, so obviously they're a little bit different. This is a creature instead of an enchantment. This is like triggering on cast instead of ETB. Like, this will not be forced to target itself once you run out of other targets, unlike Aura Shards will. But generally speaking, Silverback Elder is very similar to Aura Shards, where you're just sniping all of your opponent's artifacts and enchantments, which is fucking strong in the Commander format. Like, you remember when Dockside was printed and we're just like, oh, like your opponents just play lots of artifacts and enchantments, so you're gonna make a fuck ton of treasure.
Yeah. And
we were right. Like, surprise, surprise. So it's like, yeah, your opponents play a fuck ton of artifacts because a lot of color identities need mana rocks as their ramp package, and then a lot of decks just play enchantments because enchantments are a card type that have strong effects on them oftentimes, no matter what the color identities are. So this is just like, alright, you play a creature-focused deck with green in the color identity, and you're just sniping all of your opponent's fucking artifacts and enchantments, just like fucking blowing them out of the water, and then, oh no, like, you've already destroyed all of them, so what are you gonna do now? You don't have any targets. Oh, well, I might as well ramp. Alright. I might as well ramp and start getting lands. So you're probably going to hit from, like, the top 5. Like, oh, boo-hoo, they come into play tapped. Oh, no. And then, at the very, very worst, you're gaining 4 life, because, like, it's late in the game, and, like, your opponents have beaten you down. You start gaining 4 life to pad your life total. Oh, no, you've already ramped. And it's late in the game, so you survive. So, like, this card is fucking nuts.
That is so perfect of a way to explain this card. Like, what can't it do, really? And it's like, your creature spell doesn't even need to resolve. You just need to cast a creature spell. Yeah,
it doesn't.
Like,
it's a
that's
cast
what's,
trigger.
I think, most nuts to me. Like,
oh my God.
I'm thinking, well, I have this Skulta deck, and it's all green creatures, like literally just green creatures. if I threw this in here, like every card that I cast, like I would just like benefit from it. Like literally, just every card in the deck is a creature. So it's just like, all right, I'll do one of the three. Like, yeah, destroy a target artifact or enchantment. It's like, okay, no, I'll ramp. It's nuts.
This would be the secret commander.
Basically,
this would be the secret commander of that deck.
I think what is nice is it is 2 triple green. So I don't think you're going to see this in too many decks that aren't green heavy, if that makes sense. Like,
sure. Like, you're not going to see this in too many 5-color decks or too many 4-color decks. Probably. There might be some exceptions to that. But I still feel like even in 3-color decks, like, even in 2-color and 3-color decks, like, as if green's in the card identity, I feel like they're still gonna, like, a lot of them are still gonna play this as long as they're creature focused, because this is just so strong. Like, holy shit.
Yeah, like, Naya decks for sure. Yeah, this...
Like, I'm thinking of... yeah, you talk.
No, this is just nuts. Like, I don't know. Like, definitely, I mean, we're not talking too many cards in the 99. Like, you know, we talked about the lands. We talked about the Defiler cycle. We talked about the Angel. This, like...
Dude, imagine Nikki of the Old Ways, that Centaur Druid, where it says, like, you can basically only cast creature spells. It's like rule deck. Imagine,
oh my god, yeah.
This is basically like, for example, this would be like the secret commander of that deck.
Oh, yeah.
It's just like, oh my god, that would be disgusting.
Let me tap my lands.
That's just one example.
Let me tap my lands for 2, and then play this. Oh, also, then I'll go find
whenever you tap
more
a land
lands.
for mana, add 1 mana of any type that land produced, and like the gorilla can search out lands from the top 5. Oh my god.
That was, oh my god.
Stupid.
That's actually, you know what? That's a good deck. That's nuts. Yeah. Again, I'm very happy that we're now like cutting down our set reviews into stuff like this, where we can really just like go into some of these like nutso cards.
I love this card. This is so stupid. I'm gonna hate it when they play against my Enchantress Voltron deck so much, because it's like, no.
But when you play it, Blake, when you get to play it, you'll be like, oh yeah, this is so good.
Yeah, I'll build my Animar deck and just be like, fuck you all.
Okay, so we have 1, 2, 3 more cards to go through. I'd say like
we're almost there.
These next ones are so. I threw this one in because it's a personal favorite of mine, and I actually already bought it because my game shop just happened to have a copy for sale today.
Cool.
So this is Karn Silax, which is 3 mana, legendary artifact. It enters the battlefield tapped. Players can't pay life to cast spells or to activate abilities that aren't mana abilities. I think that's very similar to this White Angel of Jubilation. I used to play that a lot because it was like the pay life can be relevant against fetch lands. But then it also has X, tap, exile Karn Silax, destroy each non-land permanent with mana value X or less, activate only as a sorcery. So that's also what really makes this card like worth it to me. One, it's a legendary card, and I have kind of like a pseudo legendary themes matter in my deck where I like the one thing I really want is World Slayer to be a legendary artifact, but that's not how it is. But like legendary cards, much better to like just be able to search out. Can't pay life, so punishes those people playing fetch lands. And then it's a board wipe, which awesome. Like, yeah, I can kind of scale it to however I want in the game. Like, sure, I do have to wait a turn because it does enter the battlefield tapped, but like, you know, get rid of everything with 4 mana value next turn. Awesome. Like, yeah, pretty good. Like, that's gonna hit a lot of things.
God damn it.
I just be glad, Blake, it says destroy, not exile each non-land permanent.
God, yeah, fucking. I'm just thinking of like Park's colorless artifact deck and how he's playing this, how he's not going to play this, and nuke the board, and he's, you know, he can get around the way that it enters the battlefield tapped, and he just uses as a board wipe and also just a stacks piece, and it's only 3 mana. And oh my god,
There is a...
in the right deck, this card could be strong.
Yeah, I agree. Like, I don't... Like, I'm including it here because it was just a favorite of mine. I don't think this one... This isn't Silverback Elder or Sarah Paragon, where those are just generally good cards for their color. This is a artifact, so it can go into a lot of decks. I mean, it can go to any deck, really. But it's not a card that would go into any deck. It is just a card that has a home in certain style decks, and I think that's one of my decks, and I just wanted to talk about it. The other just like neat interaction that it has is, so it does exile itself, so you can't do like graveyard shenanigans necessarily, but there is Karn the Great Creator, which is fitting because it's Karn Silax, and you could do a -2, you may reveal an artifact card you own from outside the game, but wait, or choose a face-up artifact card you own in exile. Put that card into your hand. So you do have ways, if you are running Karn the Great Creator, like I am, to be able to get this back and, you know, use it again. Which is just neat. But yeah. Yep.
Alright.
2 more. Let's go.
Alright, so the next card we have is Weatherlight Completed. Like, we were initially shown the artwork for this card as concept art, so people weren't actually sure whether or not the Weatherlight ship was going to be completed, but it is confirmed that it is indeed a real card. So, it is a legendary artifact vehicle that only costs 2 mana.
It's
nuts.
It's
5/5. Yeah, with flying, but remember it's a vehicle. And as long as the Weatherlight Completed has 4 or more Phyresis counters on it, it's a Phyrexian creature in addition to its other types. Whenever a creature you control dies, put a Phyresis counter on Weatherlight Completed, then draw a card if it has 7 or more Phyresis counters on it. If you don't, scry 1. So this is a vehicle for all you vehicle deck lovers out there. And it's also a source of card advantage, whether you are actually drawing cards or whether you're just scrying 1. Regardless, it's a source of card advantage. So I feel like for the vehicle decks, this is, I don't want to say a staple, but like a serious consideration for an include.
I mean, I also think just like decks where you're looping creatures, like I was kind of thinking like TCI decks, or not TCI, KCI decks, we're just like sacrificing a creature to like recast a creature because like you're kind of just doing a loop with mana, like shard decks, I think is what I'm thinking of.
Okay,
this is just going to draw your whole deck.
Oh, that's true, isn't it? Yeah, because the way it's worded, like you create an infinite creature sack loop per se, and then do the wording. It says then draw a card if it has 7 or more. So like as soon as you sacrifice 7 or more creatures in that loop, it's going to start drawing you cards. So obviously at some point you're going to want to stop the cycle because like otherwise you're going to deck yourself and lose. But you're totally right. Yeah, this is castable for only 2, so you can just use this as a static artifact for that degree. Shit.
And again, 2 mana. Yeah, this card's also pretty good. I'm interested to see. I mean, again, I'm not terribly into the lore myself either, but I am curious to see how the Weatherlight Completed will affect the story. Like, are we going to see the Weatherlight in the next couple sets where, you know, now I think the Weatherlight is meant to travel through multi-dimensional planes, so I feel like it's going to be relevant to the story. All right. Yeah, good card. This last one has just had some talks about it because like people are like, "Oh, it's a commander staple." No, but like it's still good.
Well, let's debate about it.
All right. So it's Plaza of Heroes. It's a land. Tap, add colorless. Or tap, add 1 mana of any color, spend this mana only to cast a legendary spell. Or tap, add 1 mana of any color among legendary permanents you control. Or 3 tap, exile Plaza of Heroes, target legendary creature gains hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. Yeah, this has so many taps for just one land. This is insane. So yeah, people are just like, yeah. Protection for your commander, or just like color fixing. I think in like decks where you have 3 or more colors, like probably want to play this, because your options for just playing 3 color lands to cast cards is relatively low, but you know, this will help you cast your commander, and then once your commander's out, you have access to all the colors you want to play. I don't see this like going in monocolored or most 2-color decks, unless if you have a heavy legendary spell theme.
I think we're in agreement. Yeah, because if you're a monocolor, more or less you're just playing whatever like land type that is, plus some utility lands. If you're in 2-color, like you might be playing a few like dual-ish lands. Again, needless to say, it all depends on what your budget is as a player and like what you choose to play. But yeah, like if you're in mono or 2-color or even 3-color decks, like you probably don't want this. Like you want this really for like, what was it, the Jared Carthalion Planeswalker commander we talked about earlier, where it's like legendaries matter. Because the way I view this is, it's really mostly a colorless land. That's how I perceive it, because of the first ability of tapping to add a colorless mana. And then it's only because it only taps for colored mana once you have your commander online. So you really want a low CMC, or a low mana value, I should say, commander, so that Plaza of Heroes is online to actually tap for colored mana, hence forward. And even because once you have your commander out, like in theory, you should be able to tap for any color of mana that your commander deck needs, right? And then the last ability of getting rid of itself to like gain your commander hexproof and indestructible. That's only good if you're like, generally speaking, a highly interactive deck that holds up mana, because you still have to like pay 3 and tap. And I don't know about you, Guy, but like it's unless you're a deck that interacts at instant speed and tries to hold up mana for other turns, like it's actually kind of hard to like hold up 3 mana to like tap this at instant speed as a defensive measure, right?
Yeah, I think that's where I'm at too, where it's like 3 mana is a lot to, and then you also have to exile this card. Like it's not like you could bring it back with like, oh yeah, I'll just sacrifice this and bring it back next turn with like my Sarah Paragon or Crucible of Worlds.
Yeah.
Like you do have to give up a land. So it's almost like 4 mana in a way, because you can't also use it to tap itself.
Yeah. So I don't think this is a commander staple, as some other people have said, but like in the right deck, sure, like it's strong.
Yeah.
Yeah. Alright, so with that, we're going to move on to our last section of the episode. It is going to be discussing the Quarter 3 update from the Rules Committee.
So, last thing on our list is the Quarter 3 update from the Rules Committee. So we get one of these with each premiere set. So this is the 3rd one. We'll get one more at the end of the year. And so basically this is the time of the year, or time of the time, or not time, what is this? Like every quarter we get kind of a update on, are the cards banned, any rules changes. I'd say like, I don't know, since playing 80% of the time nothing happens.
Yep.
But this is how we're going to just send off the episode, as like if there's any big updates. To be honest, this one just kind of also feels like so-so on updates. It was kind of like teased that it would be relatively impactful, just based on like how the community read into one of Sheldon's tweets. They theorized maybe he's stepping down for his health, maybe something to do with stickers, Unfinity, how the rules command. Yeah, that's what I heard too. But fortunately, Sheldon is doing well. His health is not something that's like, you know, making him have to step down for this. But basically, what we got from this announcement was the following. So we got 3 new CAG members. We got Rebel, who, if you haven't met or haven't seen, does EDH content. They have a really cool YouTube channel I would highly recommend. We got Benjamin Wheeler and Tim Willoughby. Personally, I didn't know the other 2, but congratulations to all of them. And I just hope that each one of them can bring a new perspective to the CAG. I know Rebel is now one of 2 people who kind of focuses on CEDH. Her and Jim LePage, I believe,
yes,
are the 2 that, have a very in-depth knowledge on that side of the format, so I'm glad that they can bring their perspective in. But yeah, Blake, you know one of these other 2?
So I knew Rebel pretty early on, as you said, as a CDH content creator based out of New York. They really know that end of the meta very well, and they kind of expand, like, similar to Charlotte Sable for, like, being trans and being able to speak for that demographic to some degree. Then Benjamin Wheeler is based out of Canada. He still works with Loading Ready Run, which is a very early collaborator with Wizards of the Coast, along with great other people that I know of. He works the formats of Canadian Highlander and Gladiator. He, relatively speaking, as of the time of recording, is fairly new to Commander, but has been getting into it over the last year or so. So I'm aware of him. The person I was least familiar with was Tim, who I did a little bit of background on after reading this announcement. And Tim has a judging background and knows some of the original RC members through judging, and is able to bring a perspective from the England region. So that's, to my knowledge, a region that hasn't really been a voice in the CAG or RC up until this point. So I think all 3 of these people can bring new perspective to the CAG and to the RC as advisors. All of them, from what I've seen, are fairly level-headed people with very good intentions and only want the best for this format. Yeah, I'm optimistic. It does, again, remind me of the question that we asked a couple episodes ago about the question of how big can the RC become, or question rather of how big the Commander Advisory Group can be before it becomes not an efficient structure, because like you can't have 1,000 RC members, because that's not going to be an efficient method of synthesizing information from the community, right? So that's always a question I have, where it's like, how many more RC members can they add? And that's a question I guess we're going to get in the future.
You mean, how many more CAG members can they add?
Yes. And that is sort of something I'm wondering, because in this announcement, the RC has stated that they are interviewing for new RC members.
Yes.
And that they are in the later phases of their process to do so. That they did not feel comfortable given the timeline to announce anybody as of this announcement, but likely in the next or following announcement we will hear of new RC members. So, I am curious whether these new RC members will be names that are brand new to current RC and CAG members, or if they're going to be CAG members that are quote-unquote elevated, quote-unquote, to RC.
Yeah, almost got a promotion.
Yeah. I'm hesitant to use that kind of language, but I am curious what will become of that, and I can only speculate so much, and there's only so much value in speculating, that I'm just going to wait for the Q4 announcement, or the Q1 announcement of next year, to find out who those people are.
Well, the good news is I don't think we have to wait terribly long, because from what I read, it was more like they plan to make an announcement or post sometime in mid-September.
Oh, okay, that's soon. All right.
Yeah. I did have notes written, but I actually just deleted them because I didn't think it was worth speculating too hard, and anything that I say, like, you know, I can just either reiterate once we know who it is, or yeah, we'll just have to see. But yeah, I am very curious to see who they'll be adding, because this is like the first time in history that they've done that, and it will be quite a big announcement, so I'm excited to see what comes from it. Okay, so that wraps up our Q3 episode. We covered a lot.
Yeah, and believe it or not, like 2+ hours of us talking for a single episode covering 4 months is pretty good.
Oh yeah.
Considering, like, from a macro scale versus, like, talking about a ton of different commanders that no one really cares about.
Yeah, and so what can you expect in our next quarter announcement? So we are getting a lot. We'll see how we want to handle this, and because there's just going to be 3 different sets to cover. So first thing is we'll probably get to talk about the new Rules Committee member. We'll get to talk about Unfinity in its full. The Warhammer 40k decks will have come out by then. All of Brothers War will have come out by then. And we'll also have the Rules Committee Q4 update and Magic 30, and just possibly maybe a couple other like small things. So I'm glad that we kind of like started off easy-ish with our Q3 episode, but I do expect this next one to be one fucking nightmare.
We're moving from one nightmare to another. It's great, isn't it?
I mean, at least it's like one nightmare in one episode instead of 9 nightmares over multiple episodes.
I think you've been hanging out with braids too much. All right.
Oh yeah. I'm gonna go add her onto my TCG cart list here shortly. But
Goddamn.
All right. So we've had enough of your time. We thank you very much for listening. You can listen to us on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, YouTube, and anywhere else you listen to your podcasts. Make sure to leave a like and review. You can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at WizardStaff101. Send us an email at thewizardstaff101@gmail.com if you want to bitch and complain about how stupid we are. I probably won't read the email, so go for it. Thank you for listening, and we hope you have a great night. Peace out.
Peace out.